Paul Daner, Mark Shalafu, from listener questions to some running gags. Insider stories, ambush life, that dad life, and respect for flags. Kick off the weekend, alright? It's the Growler Friday Show. It's Dey Light.
Edition of Dey Light. I'm Mark Shalafu. With me is not Paul Daner Jr., who is on his very extravagant vacation this week, but in his steady shoes is Jay Morrison. Jay, welcome to Dey Light.
Yeah, me instead of Paul, Wednesday instead of Friday. Everything's messed up this week, but I am fired up. I mean, there is a huge game this weekend to determine if the team still has a chance to win its first ever championship. I'm talking, of course, about our Ohio University Bobcats playing lowly Ball State on Friday. Win that game, they go to Detroit for the MAC championship. Never have won a MAC championship. I've already booked a hotel room for Detroit. Refundable, of course. Yeah, well, it's refundable. So, but I'm feeling good about it. I'm feeling good about them getting to Detroit, and then we'll see if they can actually win a MAC championship for the first time in my lifetime, for the first time ever.
First time in my lifetime as well. Yeah, that'd be awesome if they do. I think this is one of the best shots they've had. So, gosh, it would really be crushing if they fumble it on Friday. But I don't see that happening. No. I don't see that happening. I think the Bobcats will be good there. At this point in the show, I would normally ask Paul what flag he's flying. I can only assume that if you drive past his house right now, it is just a giant "please don't rob my house" flag. Since he's been talking about his vacation so much. But we've got a lot to get to on today's show. But before we do, I did want to mention our friends at BetMGM Nation Kitchen and Bar. We had our show there, the Todd Frazier, my favorite game show. That was last week. So that was a fun one. I know that you were down there too. It's always a good hang down there, right? Like it's always good vibes down there. It's a great place to watch a game, watch a live show. Thursday night football is always fun. And I know that you were kind of giving out free advice to anybody that was listening to bet on the Cleveland Browns. And what I specifically appreciated about that was the fact that you weren't even in it for yourself. It's not like you had placed a giant wager on the Browns yourself. You were just kind of giving out free advice. And I took it, and I am very thankful that I did because it made me money that night from our friends at BetMGM. So, Jay, I'm going to put you on the spot later in the show to give out some more of your free betting advice and just general advice. You're not positioning yourself as an expert, but I am 100% on your picks. So I am going to press you for a little bit more later in this show.
I feel like I'm on a heater. I mean, not just that game, but I'm in a league where you just pick 5 per week, and there's a couple hundred people in the league, and I'm in 7th place right now. So I'm feeling pretty good about things, which only means a crash is coming in December, but it's going good right now.
I like it. Jay's on a heater. Things are looking up, and I want to get part of that heater. But all right, before we jump into our favorite stories of the week, any Bengals news that we need to hit up top?
Yeah, a little bit. They had a light practice on Monday night. Well, not light. They actually went good on good, even though it was 7-on-7. They had starters going against starters just to kind of get the juices flowing again after the bye week. But Zach said that Orlando Brown Jr., who's missed the last 4 games with the tennis knee, I guess it is, they will wait and see where he's at today. But he had his jersey on, he had his cleats on. He seems like he's getting closer. We'll know more later today. Sheldon Rankins, this is concerning. He's still, he woke up sick the day of the game and they ruled him out. As of Monday, that was 8 days later, and he was still battling that virus, whatever that viral illness is he has. So we'll see where he's at. But everybody else seemed to be progressing. Joe Bacci, the linebacker special teams guy, was back. Charlie Jones was on the rehab field doing some work. T. Higgins was on the rehab field as well. I think they're just playing it cautious. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about there. It's just they're not going to have him re-injure it in practice. He's just doing the lighter, more conditioning stuff to just focus on the games. As you get down the stretch, you don't want that quad firing up again and him having to miss more games. So other than that, they look pretty healthy. Sam Hubbard wasn't there, but it was for personal reasons. So they are in good shape, as teams typically are coming out of the bye.
Yeah, that's going to be big. How big of a boost do you think it would be if Orlando Brown is able to play? I mean, I know that Cody Ford hasn't looked as terrible as I expected him to look. He'd been serviceable in parts, but I got to assume that would still be a big boost for the Bengals getting him back for Steelers week.
Yeah, huge. I mean, TJ Watt against Cody Ford is not a matchup I think anybody wants to see. And you you pretty much have to chip that guy with. I mean, that's what the Browns did. They pretty much doubled him on every single snap. So you're going to be saving a tight end, keeping a tight end to help on him, or having the running back help on him. So yeah, that would be huge to get Orlando back this week.
I'm also fine with T just staying on that rehab field, given that he got injured in a practice to begin with. I'm okay.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
he wants to take it easy and just show up on game day and put up a lot of big numbers, I'm totally cool with that approach to it. 100%. Jay, what's your favorite Bengals story of the week?
So I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's the topic of the week, and it's the ping pong table coming back, and I don't get the reaction from the fans where, oh, this is gonna solve everything, and I can't believe they're playing ping pong when they're losing. They should be focused on winning, and it's nonsense. There's so many analogies I could go to here, but it's like, if say a police officer gives someone a ticket for running a red light, and people say, oh, you should be focused, there's crimes, murders, rapes going on, and you're worried about a red light. That's not how things work. You have to take care of everything. And there's another kind of story that goes back. When I was before I covered the Bengals, I was at the Hamilton Journal. I covered the Little League World Series team that went all the way to Williamsport, and those coaches spent a lot of time away from their families to be, they were a week in Indianapolis for the regional, then 10 days in Williamsport for the League World Series. And the one guy was a young dad. And I was just talking to him about being away, and he broke down and cried about missing his daughters. They were young. And so I did a story. I thought it was a nice, touching story on this guy is, helping the kids try to win a Little League World Series, but he's missing home. And the responses of people are like, what about the people in the military? They miss their families all the time. And it's just like, somebody's always got it worse. You can't bag on them putting a ping pong table in and say they should be studying. And it's their lunch break basically when they play. When they're Monday, when we saw them play, and they were done for the day. Practice ended at 2:45. They were free to go home. They're sticking around. They're bonding. They're playing. Kickers are playing with defensive tackles. Linebackers are playing with wide receivers. I think it's a good thing. And I it's silly on the surface. Yes, ping pong's not going to help you win football games, but everybody knows chemistry, camaraderie, all that kind of stuff does help you win football games. And if ping pong's the vehicle for it, so be it. I just don't get everybody making such a big deal out of the ping pong.
I think we've hit that point in the season where fans are going to just latch on to anything to complain about, right? Anything that's going to be a break from fire Zach, fire Duke Tobin, sell the team, Brown family, all that kind of stuff that people hit over and over. So if there's a new thing to glom onto, it's ping pong. Oh, what are these guys doing? But I'm with you, man. I feel like the ping pong table, I almost feel like they should have pulled this card out earlier. Let's build this camaraderie, bring it back like 3 games ago when it really could have made a huge difference if it does work out for them. All the things that you just said about the ping pong table, it's been around for a couple of years. Like it makes me more suspicious that they got rid of it at the beginning of the season. Do you think that was the wrong move? Do you think they should have just kept the ping pong table, not messed with that chemistry?
Yeah, I think it was more an aesthetics thing where they had the ping pong tables in OTAs and training camp when they were in the makeshift locker room while they were trying to get the main locker room finished. And then they unveil this gorgeous new locker room. I just don't think they wanted to have ping pong tables in there to kind of take away from the aesthetics of how nice the locker room looked. And then once it was gone, maybe nobody complained about it. A lot of the guys that played the most are no longer on this team. Tyler Boyd, Trent Taylor, those kind of guys. So I think part of this has to do with Hard Knocks coming in for the AFC North version of the show, which started recording this week. It's been kind of dead in that locker room. They're losing, and so there's just not a lot of energy in there, and guys are quick to get out of there because they don't want to do interviews when they're losing. And this is something to kind of bring some energy back to the locker room and make it look more alive and vibrant for the Hard Knock cameras. And nobody's said that, but if I'm just kind of adding one and one together, I think that did play a role.
I kind of like that approach even more then, because you do need to have something for the Hard Knocks people to kind of latch onto. And if it's a little ping pong tournament, that's better than, watching us lose highlights of close games over and over. Who are the good ping pong players on the team, by the way?
Well, Trenton Irwin's really good. Jermaine Pratt and Akeem Davis Gaither are just this dynamic. They play all the time, and they were the ones that they were always going against Tyler Boyd and whoever Tyler was playing with. Those games were fun to watch. The trash talk was through the roof. It was super competitive. Even Joe Burrow would pull up a chair and watch when those guys played back in the day. And then I think a kind of a sleeper guy. I tweeted this out. When they came off of practice, the first people to jump on the table was Jermaine Burton and wide receivers coach Troy Walters. And the way that Jermaine Burton was holding his paddle told you he had played a lot of ping pong before. He held it kind of, like the guys in the Olympics do, where it's upside down and you're kind of,
oh yeah.
And he knew what he was doing, but he was quickly off the table and replaced with Jamar Chase. I don't know if Jamar pulled rank on him or if Jermaine just wanted to play a couple points with Troy and got out of there. But I know Charlie Goldsmith, who used to write for the Inquirer, he had an entire power rankings of the Bengals ping pong players, and he had takes and he had scouting reports on all of them. So it is something to watch when there's not much else going on in that locker.
Yeah, they should spin that off. Maybe Hard Knocks can cover that tournament and kind of make that a side story. The ping pong tables, though, that's a bye week thing. Makes a much bigger deal during a bye week. It hits different when there's not a lot of other news for fans to get mad about. There's not another game where things went right or wrong. And that's kind of where I'm at with my story too. And also, like, I'm with you. It's not necessarily my favorite story. It's just the one that I saw pop up a lot. And that was Joe Mixon kind of throwing some shade at some of the Cincinnati people, which I don't know is necessarily super surprising. I do think it is interesting when you see how, like, sometimes you'll get reporters that are trying to get some sort of insight about the past teams from guys. And like DJ Reader has faced those questions before and hasn't said a whole lot of negative things about, and I'm sure he probably could. So it wasn't necessarily surprising that, Joe Mixon took a shot or two, even though I feel like it was a little bit overblown. But Joe Mixon is one that I don't quite understand the fan reaction to, right? Because, if you're looking at players the Bengals did not bring back and let go into free agency, obviously I understand the DJ Reader angst and the fact that a lot of fans wanted him brought back, especially with what we've seen from Sheldon Rankins this season. But I felt fine. Like, Mixon is the one that trade kind of worked out for both teams. He's been playing better this season than I think anybody, at least on our program, expected him to. I know there was talk that he might not even find another job if he was cut loose. Chase Brown has had a successful season, so I don't get why some fans want to use Mixon as like kind of the point to grind against the Bengals, as saying like, oh, they blew it with Joe, they let him go away for nothing. He could have been making a difference for us. I don't really feel that. I feel like he's kind of more along the lines of like, I'm happy for the guy. I'm glad he's having success somewhere else, but I don't know that that on the long list of free agent moves or player moves that they made in the offseason, it would really materially affect how this season has gone in any way.
Yeah, because that's what they wanted, was to get more explosive in the run game, and Chase Brown has a much higher explosive rate than Mixon had here. Now Mixon he's had some explosive runs with the Texans. I'm trying to remember because they got a 7th round pick from him. I can't remember which 7th round pick it was, but I think it was Matt Lee. And he's shown that he's got a future in this league. He could be a starting offensive lineman for this team down the road. So yeah, it could pay off in the long run. I kind of chuckled at Mixon referring to fake ass beat reporters in Cincinnati. I still to this day do not know what he was so upset about. And I even, after the whole thing where in that day in the locker room, he said, I'm not talking to you or you or you. And he singled out the 4 of us that he wasn't going to talk to anymore. And I just kind of let it die for a week. And then there was a really slow day the following week, and I kind of waited it out. It was the end of the open locker room period, and I waited all the reporters out, and I was the last one in there. And I went up to Joe's locker and I was like, hey, can I just talk to you about this? Can I just ask you what you're upset about and talk about this man to man? And he stared straight ahead and wouldn't even acknowledge my presence. And I was like, all right, if you want to act like a child, that's how you want to handle this, then that's where it goes. So I assume he was upset with us covering his court case and the civil suit for the gun incident at his house, but don't know because he wouldn't talk about it. He would just stare at the wall and not even answer questions.
Which is still, I mean, it's crazy that not only would that, whatever it was, affect him that deeply. And if it was something as reporting on the court case, like that's obviously fair ground. That's news. You
Yeah.
got to report on that. But the fact that he's still kind of holding on to that, he's in a good situation. He's having a
Yeah.
good season. He could have taken the DJ Reader route where he's just, taking the high road and just kind of focusing on the present and not taking the shots at the past. But the fact that, it was the beat reporters that he is still holding a grudge onto is just wild to me. Like this much later, he still can't get past it.
It's week 13.
I know it is crazy. But again, glad he's having a great season out there. I don't think that it would have been nearly that good if he had stayed in Cincinnati. And, so I don't know that Bengals fans should be all that upset the fact that he is having some success elsewhere. But we do have a lot to get here from our Growl pals. We appreciate all the questions we've received to the Growler podcast at gmail.com. Jay, are you ready to step in and take out some of these questions?
I am. Let's do it.
We're kind of all over the map because it is a bye week. And so our first one, we're going to Paul C. He said, we'll start. This is a two-parter. So we're going to start with his Bengals question, at least. He says, loves Paul and Jay's assessment of the coaching staff. He believes the young defensive draft picks would benefit greatly from a different defensive coordinator. He also thinks it would be unfair to fire the guy who is putting behind the offense, putting up such great numbers. And, he also says that sloppiness abounds. And as a player coach, can he be tough enough? I think he's referring to Zach Taylor on that one. But he says he's pleading with Paul and his history of the organization to do some crystal ball gazing. So we're going to ask you to do some crystal ball gazing in this part of it. If you can't blame the coaches because the team is just not talented enough, and the mechanism that chooses the talent, whether that's Duke or the family, won't ever be replaced, what hope do fans have that things will get better?
I guess 2021. I mean, you saw it. It can happen. Anybody can catch lightning in a bottle. If you have Joe Burrow, that famous quote he had about the championship window is my entire career. That guy's gonna give you a chance. But yeah, if you're looking for a team to just throw caution to the wind in terms of the future and go all in and sell out to try to win a title, that's never going to be the case with this team. And you got to kind of just ride with it and understand they are who they are. And if it's so ingrained, you grew up cheering for them, sometimes it's hard to kick that habit. But that's where I see where the hope is. They do have quality players. They can. This league is so year to year, and every year you see teams kind of come out of nowhere. So any team can get hot and go on a run, and we've seen this team do that in the past. So, would I bet on it happening? Maybe not, but there is hope there. As long as Joe Burrow is throwing passes and Jamar Chase is catching them, there is hope that this team can figure out a way to be competent on defense and make another run.
Yeah, I feel like there should be more hope from what we've seen this season, just from the fact that like Joe Burrow's injury being a little unique among quarterbacks. There was some concern about how he would look this season. Would he ever be the same? The doomsayers on Twitter and stuff were often trotting that out, that his career would be cooked. And then he's looked fantastic. So if you're a Bengals fan, like you got to have that hope of like, even when they have missed on so many free agent decisions or draft picks and things that have put this particular season in a hole, just the fact that Joe and Jamar have been so good and can still pull you to a team that could reasonably be, 7-4 at this point, or have a much better record, that's got to be encouraging. That's your hope right there. Yeah, this team has a lot of holes. They don't need to fill every single one of them. They just need to fill a few more of them, and this team is going to look radically different. But I do feel go ahead.
I would take exception to the one thing Paul C said about the sloppiness, because I don't think this team is sloppy. They've been among the best in the league in fewest penalties, fewest penalty yards since Zach got here. You watch other games, and it's so frustrating when there's, illegal motions or guys are covered up, and you just don't see this from this team. I think they're really on point from that aspect of it. I think the sloppiness kind of gets to technique and mistakes, physical mistakes like that. But as far as being prepared and being in the right spot, I think they do a really good job of that. And it's maddening sometimes when you watch these games and you're watching, they're doing all kinds of motion and they're not getting lined up properly. And it's like, why even practice? they've worked on this over and over again. How are they not getting it right? Such a simple thing right during the game. And I think that has been one encouraging thing from this Zach Taylor regime is you just don't see a lot of that kind of sloppiness from this offense, especially.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. His second part of his question is he was just really relating. He is also a sports writer and related a story about, similar to Paul's laptop getting fried a few weeks ago about losing his at the 1998 Nagano Olympics. Sorry, that should have been easier for me to read on that. But his laptop died at the Olympics. That's a tough one. And, I can see how that would be terrifying as a writer. What's your worst tech story that you've got during your career? Like, what have you ever had the laptop that is crapped out in mid-game, or something that you were trying to file and then your just internet blew up and you couldn't get the story sent across? Any tech terrors from your career?
Yeah, from back in the day, way back in the day when you were using the old Tandy Radio Shack computer, and you had to put a phone in the couplers and get that to go, and it was not very reliable. So there was many times where stories were written by me dictating to the copy desk. I would just read my story to them and they would type it up and have to do that. And then there's always in the high school days where you just can't find a phone line. This is before Wi-Fi and all that, and you're just trying to do whatever you can, and you're going into the principal's office and unplugging the fax machine and using that phone line to try to send a story. And I've sent stories from fast food places. I've sent stories. I sent one. It was winter time. It was freezing. And I went to a Panera and sat outside of Panera so I could get on their Wi-Fi, and just sat there with freezing hands trying to type my story. So it happens to all of us. Nothing to that. I mean, that's something else to have your computer crap out at the Olympics. I can't imagine the stress that would cause.
Yeah, that would be insane, because that's then just multiple days of having to do that, finding workarounds and different alternatives and that kind of stuff, which is a huge nightmare. But yeah, that is the glamorous side of sports reporters, right? They don't imagine them sitting outside a cold Panera and just trying to get that story sent in on time. Our next question here is more of a rant from Ralph. He says, "Hi guys, I've been a fan since the beginning. I understand the frustration that all fans feel about this season. However, they are literally inches away from having a very respectable record. The constant stream of negative posts urging Mike Brown to sell the team, fire the coach, fire the GM is exhausting. I have met Paul Brown, Mike Brown, and the Blackburns. No one wants to win more than they do. To insinuate otherwise is moronic. We would have 3 Super Bowl wins right now with just a little luck. So, for the love of God, can we please give it a rest and just enjoy the marvelous players that we get to watch every week? It hasn't always been this way. Sorry, rant over." From Ralph. I feel like that might be a burner account for management right there. Like,
yeah, Duke,
I can't imagine a more flattering email from just given the tenor of what we've seen from the Growl Pals lately. This is very much going the other way on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one thing to want something really badly, and it's another thing to work toward, do everything possible to work towards it. I want to be a millionaire more than anybody in the world, but I'm not doing the things necessary to get out there and do it. I'm a sports writer, so yeah. I mean, I do. I'm with them. I get tired of hearing the same stuff year after year, but it's until they change the narrative and win one, they're going to have to deal with it, and everybody else is going to have to deal with listening to it. It's going to be the same complaints year after year because they do the same thing year after year.
Yeah, and I think that's easy for fans. Like, we can talk ourselves into any situation, right? So when the team drafted Joe Burrow and kind of turned things around, went to that Super Bowl, they were great the next season. It was very easy to kind of talk yourself into like, oh, this is a whole franchise-wide reset. Everything's going to be different now going forward. Oh, we're doing the Ring of Honor. We're doing this. We're doing, the white helmets. This is all cool new stuff. And, that's always not reality, where everything's going to change like that overnight. And I also get the frustration with the frustration, like it is a lot of the same thing. As soon as the season goes south, it's fire the coach, fire this, fire that. But, you got to take into account all the trauma the Bengals fans had for years.
Yeah.
And, they being a good team with Joe Burrow, that helped change a lot of it, but a little shakiness, and you're going to go right back to that trauma position. And I get it too. I get the frustration of the fans because you've got an all-time great quarterback. Like Joe Burrow's putting up MVP numbers, and the team is not in a good playoff position.
No.
So I understand the frustration and surprise, and whether it's Duke Tobin or ownership or coaching or maybe a little bit of all of it. I don't know that I would have a problem with any sort of fan complaint at this point in the season, even if it is a little bit redundant, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, you let good players walk out the door. That happens. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions, but you better replace them. And that's not happened. They have not found an answer for Jesse Bates. They've not found an answer for DJ Reader. So I think that's what kind of adds to the frustration, where it just seems like they're letting guys go just so they don't have to pay them, which is part of it. You can't pay everybody, but you've got to find a way to replace the good ones when you let them go, and they have not been able to do that.
Yeah, and it definitely hurts this season when you look at some of the guys they spent money on, and you're like, what are we getting from Sheldon Rankins? This is not what we thought it was going to be, especially when so many fans going into the offseason and like, here's the problem. We need defensive linemen, and it seems easy. I know on this show, like you and Paul were talking about Tier Tart. He might be the guy, and then he ended up not being the guy, but he's had a pretty solid season. So it's tough when you see other guys that could have been here kind of producing elsewhere. That only adds to the frustration when our free agents are not quite producing the way that we expected them to. Our next question is from Hank. He says, Dear Growl Dudes, this is a why don't they hire anyone, not a why don't they fire anyone email. He says, looking at the strengths and shortcomings of the season, if I shan't shout, fire Lou, fire Duke, get a new owner, that's not going to be it. It's going to be hire some scouts, and clearly the scouting's not working for the draft or the free agency. Can we hire more scouts? They had success building the Super Bowl team. Can we look at the front office success and the failure recently, and why the team would just not make a bigger scouting department, given the record that they've had with that in the past?
I mean, I kind of buy into Duke's philosophy of too many cooks in the kitchen, that analogy, where it's not a good thing when you have to, it's not, he always says it's not about the number of voices you have in the room, it's the right voices. And maybe back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that was a huge criticism, because you had to have these guys spreading out across the country and scouring and scouting and doing all that work. Now everything, push of the button, you can call up every third down pass rush that a defensive end, everything's on film, everything's accessible, everybody gets the same stuff. And so it is, and these guys do still, it's a small staff, but they bust their butts, and they're out there traveling every week and watching these college games. And so, yeah, it does look bad when you have the smallest of anything and you haven't won. That it does open you up for criticism. But I don't think it's the issue that some people think it is, that it is really important to do it the way they do it. And you put a lot more on the coaches' plates, but you're putting it on their plates after the season. It's not like they're scouting players right now, but then when the season ends, I think that's a really important thing for the coaches to kind of be involved in the scouting process. A lot of teams, the scouts they keep the coaches at an arm's length, and they don't want to hear what the coaches have to say. They have in their minds the kind of players that they're looking for. But to have that symbiotic relationship, where knowing the type of player that you're looking for, both personality and skill wise, it hasn't panned out. They've had some rough couple drafts, but before these last couple of drafts, they were really hitting for a while. Nobody's going to be perfect year after year after year. So I just don't. I get it. Because the department is so small, but I don't think it's the issue that most people think it is.
Yeah, and that's another one that's just easy to point to, like you said, right? It's just like, well, this draft was terrible. We don't have the scouts everyone else has. That's got to be it. And fans are sort of looking for anything to glom onto. So that is some good insight into different scouting approaches. Our next question, this is a little bit simpler. What happened to DJ Ivey? Last year, he was showing us hope for this season. Then he tore his ACL. He got injured again. But we haven't seen or heard anything from him lately, with more injuries to the secondary. Where is DJ Ivey in all this?
I mean, he's getting back. Since he's been back, he's played half of the special team snaps. So he's really getting involved there. They have a package for him on third down. When they go into dime with 6 defensive backs, he's in there on those third downs. And I think it's been between 12 and 16% of the snaps the last 3 weeks. So he's getting in there. They're working him into it. Let's not forget he's a 7th round pick. So it's not as though he's this can't miss cornerback prospect. They really did like the way he was coming on last year, but the injury is the big part of this because that happened in December and you have all that rehab time. So he missed all of OTAs and a good chunk of camp. And it just takes a while to build that back up. Yeah, physically you're ready, but mentally and time on task in the scheme and in the defense, you have to be patient with it. And I think that's what they're doing. They're working him in. And if they start liking what he's doing on these third downs, which you would think they would because they haven't diminished that role, it's increasing. He will work his way in there. But I think that's what he is going to be, is a package defensive back. I don't think he's ever going to be a starting corner.
I know, obviously, with the injuries to the secondary, it's been a little bit trickier, especially with DJ Turner going down. Josh Newton is going to get to start. What are you expecting from Josh? And you were talking about ping pong tables. I love that quote from him when I don't know who it was that asked him. If he just said, "I don't play ping pong, I play DB." That's a hard quote. That's a tough guy quote. And it makes me want to root for his success even more. I mean, it's not an easy position to step in as a rookie into the starting role there. But what do you think he'll hold his own, or should we be concerned about him?
A little concern. He is a rookie. He's stepping into his first start. There's gonna be missed assignments. He's gonna give up completions and maybe even a touchdown. But I like this guy a lot. I was the one that asked him that, and it was kind of at the end of the it was at the end of the interview, and I was, you just kind of lighten it up. You go, "So how's your ping pong game?" And that's when he dropped that line. But I was like, "So you're making your first career NFL start, and it's Thanksgiving weekend, so you're gonna have your parents in for Thanksgiving and have a bunch of people. How many people are you gonna have at the game?" And he said no. He's like, "I get it." He's like, "I'm not downplaying this opportunity. I know not a lot of rookies get this chance to start as a rookie, so I'm taking this serious. I understand how big of an opportunity this is, but this is what I work for. This is my job. He's not looking for distractions for his family to come in for Thanksgiving and bring a bunch of guys into the game." And I like him a lot. The Bengals have loved him since training camp. He made plays in camp. You can just tell, just that one quote kind of sums up his entire persona. He is a very serious, locked in guy, and he was playing well. I think had DJ Turner not broke his clavicle in that game, I think you would see Josh Newton still starting in this game opposite DJ Turner, and it would be Cam Taylor-Britt on the bench. That's not how bad the Cam played in that game. So this is a big opportunity for Josh, and it's not just because of injury. He got into a game because of a Cam Taylor-Britt benching against the Chargers, and he played really well. So I expect to see him play well in these final 6 games.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting thing for Bengals fans to watch, to see if he could be a dude in that rotation going forward. And I'm looking kind of for that, sleeper hit in this draft class, since Eric All went down and he was my guy and he was having such a great season. That was such a bummer of an injury. And so now I've kind of taken all that Eric All energy and thrown it on Josh Newton. So I'm pulling for Josh this week. So we're getting into a little bit of the crazier questions here. This is a little bit of a conspiracy theory. Let's see how you feel about this one. Do you think there's any correlation between the Bengals being the only dissenting vote on almost all NFL proposals and the fact that they are seemingly victim to so many missed calls that are then followed by fines for the opposing team or acknowledgments that the calls were missed? How do you feel about that conspiracy?
I will dismiss that conspiracy. I think the league chuckles and just shakes their head when it's 31-1 and the Bengals are on. They're not affecting anything. The vote's passed. It's not like they get to raise their fist and be like, "We did it," if they get a unanimous vote on something. And the other thing is too that everybody sees the missed calls for their team and don't really realize how much it goes on around the league. You're not watching every snap of these other teams' games, and teams get screwed all the time. And it's funny because everybody thinks the Chiefs get all the calls, where the Chiefs fans think they get punished because they're the champs and they want to see a new team come in and win. So it's a good point. I think somebody needs to come up with a screwed metric, or how many times a team gets screwed by a bad call. But I will say too, like the unpenalized hits that result in fines, I don't know that that's been that big of an issue. I'd have to go back and look, but the two the two fines from the Chargers games, the horse collar tackle and then the body weight roughing the passer penalty, both those had penalties on the field. The Max Crosby late hit on Joe Burrow that he got fined for, that play was penalized as well. It was just that one face mask in Baltimore, which was such a huge deal, the 2-point play. That one didn't get penalized, should have ended up in a fine. So I think those are the ones you remember and they really stick with you.
Some of those fines do just seem a little crazy too, where Jamar's getting fined. He doesn't even know why sometimes. I don't know that you could throw a whole lot of stock into, making that of like, oh, they fined a guy that clearly that means that the refs should have blown it or should have made the call, but they have this axe to grind against the Bengals. I love a good conspiracy theory. It just feels like a little step too far. Like think of all the steps that would be included for, the NFL to kind of work with all the different officiating crews of like, all right, we're going to take this out on the Bengals because they were a dissenting vote on this thing that didn't matter anyway because it still passed easily. So any calls at any big moments, if you can look the other way, that would really help us out with this axe that we're grinding against the team for that. But I do appreciate people trying to connect the dots in whatever way that they can come up with. So Growl Pals, keep sending your emails to the Growler podcast at gmail.com. Since it is Dey Light, we've got a couple lighter ones. This one's from Christian. He says he's a big fan of the podcast. You guys are helping me get through this season. He's got a 13-year-old daughter who actually requests the Growler when he's driving her. Like that's huge. We're a big hit with the kids. She has decided to do a podcast for a school project. He said it's a 2-person podcast. And he's asking if we have any advice on apps to record and edit a local in-person podcast, or even if we don't have specific apps, just any sort of general podcast advice for Christian here.
I love this. Christian, your daughter's going places to want to do something like this at that age. I mean, my dad always implored me to join the school paper when I was in high school, and I never did. I waited till college to do it. And I think this is really good. You need to get the reps. It's just like, if you want to be a writer, just keep a journal. It doesn't matter if anybody ever reads it. Write a blog, put a blog on the internet. It doesn't matter if anybody reads it. You need to get the reps. You need to get the practice. Same with podcasting. I would say StreamYard, what we're using right now, is the app to go with in terms of recording the podcast. Invest in a really good microphone that helps make it sound better. And then Audacity is what I like to edit audio in. It's free. You can just download it for free. StreamYard is free as well, as long as you're not trying to get all the bells and whistles and load in a bunch of videos and that type of stuff. So it's a great way to get started. The ambition is there. Just need the reps. I love it. I would love to hear an update on how this podcast is going, what they talk about. I can only imagine what 13-year-old girls talk about. Hopefully it's not like a Mean Girls kind of thing. You don't want to do that. You don't want to put that out there. But I am interested in what the topic is, what the title is. And if they get it up and running, let us know. We'd love to listen to an episode and maybe give it a critique.
Yeah, I'm also interested in what the topics are for, like, if it's just them roasting their teachers and just taking everybody else down, they're just doing a whole episode on their parents and just kind of crapping all over them. That would terrify me as a parent, having my kid with a successful podcast too. Like if she really got into it and became something, because you see those 6-year-old kids that have like YouTube channels or something, and they're making millions of dollars a year, just opening toys and stuff. It's insane stuff. I think that's a little young, some of those kids that were forced into those. But there is a world where, those teenagers are making money now on social media and stuff like that. So your kid could have a hit podcast at 13 or 14. And that and all it entails would probably terrify me in terms of what they talk about.
Yeah, because you live this world where with comics, a lot of times, a lot of their family is the butt of their jokes, the part of their act, and it's a tough thing. It's like, well, you're kind of telling some stuff that maybe you don't want out there, but it's also making money. And I could just see like, don't get me started on curfews or talking about allowances. And it's been a long time since I was 13. Obviously, the world has changed, but I am interested to see what those topics are.
Yeah, and you're right, because even from the comedy standpoint, like there are plenty of shots that I've taken about my family, and of course it goes to help pay for those vacations and nice things that they have. But that does sort of scare me when those tables can turn eventually, when they start to get their own voice and put it out in the world through social media or a podcast or whatever it is when they get older. That could definitely be coming around for me. Now, before we get to predictions, Our RPB Growler bet is coming up here, and also some excellent advice from you. Hopefully, excellent advice at the end of the show,
Yes.
because you're still 100% in my book. But before we do that, let's talk about our friends from Future Fans. Let me just say this. First of all, I've used the Future Fans product, and it can be hard to introduce the sport of football to young kids, right? Like soccer, a lot of the young kids play soccer, so it's easy to flip on the game. They kind of get it, right? This team's trying to kick it in that goal. The other team's trying to kick it in this goal. Football, for me, was always a little bit trickier with my daughters to get them to learn the game and the different nuances, the 4 downs and why this counts for 3 points and that counts for 6 points and the extra point is just 1, all that kind of stuff. So the people at Future Fans came up with an excellent product. It's a family-oriented thing around football. They help little kids become big sports fans, and it's like a storybook, activity-based thing. So you read a chapter, then you're opening one of these little boxes, and it gives the kids a reason to kind of follow through. And it introduces all like the core concepts of the sport. And instead of just explaining like 4 downs in football, it gives you like a little game with rings and beanbags that they get to take 4 tosses at to try and get to the next level and that sort of thing, all the way down to the touchdown. So it kind of really introduces that in a different way, a way that my 5-year-old had fun with. She loved doing the ring game. So it's designed for kids ages 4 to 8. And of course, the football fan adult in their life. So it is a really fun thing to do together. And that's much easier than just flipping on a game and then having your child like hear you yell expletives every time Tanner Hudson fumbles a football or drops a pass. This is a much easier way to introduce them to the game. They do have a Black Friday deal going on. It's only $49.99 if you go to futurefans.com/Bengals for the early Black Friday deal, and Cyber Monday deal is 25% off. It is the lowest price point of the season, and it goes back up in early December. So again, futurefans.com/Bengals for that. And you can also get it locally at King Arthur's Court.
I love that whole idea. I wish that was around when my kids were younger. You think back to your childhood, and some of my fondest memories are going to games with my dad, and kind of it would have been great to. I remember the first Bengals game I went to. I wasn't really even that big of a football fan. I didn't understand it, but it was cool going to the game with my dad, and it would have been great to have something like that to kind of introduce you to it. I always think back about things. Oh, I wish this was there when my kids were young, or I'm glad this wasn't there. Smartphones, tablets, I'm glad those weren't around when my kids were young and they're just sitting there on a tablet the entire time at dinner. And you see so many families doing that now, but this is one I really do wish this was around when my kids were young, because they were kind of slow to get into football. And a lot of times I was covering games and working anyhow. And that would be something fun to do during the week. Any activity you can do with your kids is just so valuable. And if it's something that's going to create a lifelong bond, like we talked about before, so much of fandom is rooted in your childhood and when you're first introduced to a team. I just love this entire product.
It's a very cool thing, and you got to support the Growl Pals, and so go check them out. Check out our friends at Future Fans. All right, are you ready for an Ambush Light question?
Okay, sure.
So these are a little bit more off the wall. They're just kind of random questions. And, Paul likes them some weeks he does not, but we accept them all to the Growler podcast at gmail.com. And since he did mention you were going to be on Dey Light, we did get a J-themed ambush question here. He says, we were joking last week about, because somebody asked Paul why Evan always runs to the locker room. The person had noticed Evan leaving the sideline 3 or 4 times during a couple different games to run to the locker room. Paul didn't have an answer that week, but we were joking that he was going back to watch video of the old halftime performance from the Super Bowl. So this question is along the lines of that. What concert does Jay wish he could rewatch over and over again in private, even if it meant missing parts of a Bengals game you were covering? Love the show. Glad to have Jay on Dey Light this week.
This is going to totally be recency bias. There would be 2 of them. So this past July, we saw Foo Fighters, and we've seen them a bunch. But this was the closest we'd ever been. We were right down in the pit, and that was amazing. And it was my wife's birthday, and we were with my wife and some friends. My son and his girlfriend came. It was so fun being around that many people, and it's her favorite band. So watching her get to experience that on her birthday. But But then there was one a couple years ago. I went to Indianapolis for a Luke Combs concert. I went by myself. I had a GA ticket. I waited in line, ran in there. I got right up on the rail in the front, and I'm by myself. And there was 5 acts. I stood in the same 2 foot by 2 foot spot for 6 hours because I didn't dare leave, because there was no way I was going to get back to that spot. I didn't have anybody to save my spot. I made friends with people around me, but I knew it was just so far away. So didn't drink a single beer. I've never done that at a concert before. And it was an incredible show. Lainey Wilson, Luke Combs, Riley Green. It was one of the most memorable nights that I've had, probably because I didn't have any beers, but just being by myself and kind of making new friends. And the show was incredible. Both those shows were incredible. I would gladly skip some work and go back and rewatch either one of those concerts.
I also think that going to a concert by yourself isn't as weird as some people might think. I think that movies, going to a game by yourself, those are things that where you're watching an event happen. Like, you don't necessarily have to have a big group of people. Going to a movie by yourself, I've done that on the road, and my wife always thinks that's weird. I'm like, what? I'm just in a dark movie theater watching a film. It's not like you have to talk to somebody the entire time during the movie. So I can see how a concert, even alone, would be a pretty different experience, but still a pretty strong one,
Yeah, my wife was out of town, so it wasn't like I just ditched her to go to this show by myself. I've gone to shows by myself. The band, she doesn't like the band, but then I've done other ones. I've done all those things. I've gone to movies by myself, been to a lot of games by myself.
And I feel like that's okay, though. Like, those are still, you can enjoy yourself, make friends around you, and you're still going to have a good time. Growler bet. Let's get to our Growler bet this week.
All right. So the big topic, I mean, we were talking about earlier, Josh Newton, DJ Ivy, if he gets in there, what is this Bengals defense and specifically the pass defense going to look like over these last 6 weeks? And the Pittsburgh passing offense is not very good. I mean, they've won games this year without scoring a touchdown. So I think this is the perfect Growler bet to go with this week, is not net passing yards for the Steelers. So that's passing yards minus any kind of sack yardage. The Steelers have failed to break 200 net passing yards in 6 of their 11 games this year. We know the Bengals have had no trouble giving up more than 200 passing yards in a lot of games this year. But their average is only 225. So where are you going to land on that, Mark? Net passing yards for the Steelers.
I am going to have them breaking 200. I'm going to go 211. And my reasoning for that is just, I feel like in the first half of the Baltimore game, they did a good job slowing down Derrick Henry in the rushing attack. And I feel like the only way that the Steelers are not going to break 200 against this, embattled secondary is probably going to be if they're running the ball really well and having a lot of success in some long drives. I feel like the Bengals might be able to bottle that up. I do feel like they might give up a couple big passing plays. So I'm going to go with 211 on that.
Yeah, I went strictly from a math standpoint. It's so funny that we are this close. I swear I'm not Price is writing you here, but I went 212 because I took the average between what the Bengals are allowing, 225, and the average of what the Steelers are getting in 192, and that's the middle point. And it kind of throws back to Paul and I had a thing for a while there where all of my Growler bets were always palindromes. It reads the same forward and backwards. So I just felt like 212 was the perfect time to bring the palindrome back out. But it's funny you went 211 because it's going to be easy to figure out who wins.
Yeah, we're totally locked in on that front. But we want all those guesses to the Growler podcast at gmail.com. I feel like it's been a little bit since we've had a winner, right? Or did we have a winner on the last one?
We did not have a winner. We had a so close. It's been, I think, 3 or 4 weeks since we had one, and it might be the only one we've had all year.
We're due for some wins here. So let's, is there a range, or do they need to hit the number exactly for this?
This one, you got to hit on the nose.
So yeah, you got to really come strong with this one. Growl Pals, send those guesses to the Growler podcast at gmail.com. Make sure Growler bet is in that subject line somewhere, and obviously still come with those creative subject lines. Some of those are fantastic. And do you guys still do the hashtag on Twitter too?
Yeah, hashtag Bengals Growler bet, and you can put yours in there as well. But Paul does love going through the creative subject headers, and that'll maybe be something for him to do on his drive back from his vacation. He'll make Megan take the wheel, and he can go through the Growler subject headers.
Yeah, he can read them out for the family. They can all enjoy it that way, while they're also listening to Who Dey Light. So shout out Paul's family if you guys are listening on the long drive home from your trip. But since it is a holiday week, you've got a holiday RPB for us, right?
Yeah. So Thanksgiving, there's a lot of ways you can handle Thanksgiving. So what's your preference, Mark? Or what would be your preference? I don't know if you've done all three of these. I have done all three. For Thanksgiving, run, pass, or boot, hosting for the family, going to a relative's house, within a couple hours drive, nothing crazy, or going to a restaurant for Thanksgiving.
This is a tough one. I like this one a lot. I'm gonna go probably with driving. I'm running with driving 2 hours, less than 2 hours to a relative's house, just for the big reason of you lose out on all the dishes, all that kind of bummers that you have when you're hosting. You don't have to spend hours cleaning your house, getting all that stuff together. The cooking usually falls on whoever's hosting. That can be a bit of a chore. I like just showing up, chopping it up with people, having a few drinks, just eating the food, and then leaving like it's a restaurant. I think that I would have to probably pass with the restaurant, although I've not done that one before. I have friends that have gone the restaurant route on Thanksgiving, and they say it's a real nice change of pace. And then booting hosting, just because of all the extra headaches that entails, even though we've done that on a number of occasions. Yeah, get rid of the hosting all day for me. How do you go on this one?
Yeah, I'm with you. We don't have a lot of Thanksgiving traditions, but the one I have is we're always driving at noon on Thanksgiving to go to wherever we're going, whatever relative it is. And I insist on putting on WEBN. They always play Alice's Restaurant at noon on, and it's one of those traditions. I make my kids suffer through it. They're not kids anymore, but we all have to listen to Alice's Restaurant on the drive. I like driving anyhow. I'm with you. I like going there. You do feel a little guilty when they start to do the dishes and do the cleanup. It's like, do I help? Do I offer to help? Or do I just sit here and watch the football game? So I'll run with driving. Same thing. I'll pass on restaurant. We've done it a few times. The downside with the restaurant is if it's a big group, it's a big table, and you don't really get to interact with people at the other end of the table. Whereas if it's you're at someone's house, you're in different rooms, and you spend time talking to the different groups of people, but you don't really mill around a restaurant. So you lose out on that. And then boot to the moon hosting. We've done it twice, and both ended up in disaster, because the first time was just a Friendsgiving. We were married, but we didn't have kids yet. And my wife had peeled some potatoes, and the peelings stopped up the sink, and it was just a disaster the next day. And then when we did have kids, and we had the family over, and have an autistic nephew, and he went up to go to the bathroom and stopped it up and freaked out when it started overflowing and didn't know what to do other than just stare at it. And we're all in the kitchen. All of a sudden there's a waterfall in our kitchen because it started coming down. So yes, the 2 times we've hosted Thanksgiving have not gone well. I'm fine if we never host it again.
Yeah, it sounds like a cursed thing. I feel like we should just make you do it one more time just to finally break this and show that you can still pull off a successful Thanksgiving. That is awful. What we hosted when the only time we had to host when we had kids, we just had our newborn, but it was in New York City. So having to do it, we had my wife's family come in. So her parents and brother and his fiance at the time. So like having that many people in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in New York City with a newborn made hosting challenging. It was a nicely sized 1-bedroom apartment, but it was still a 1-bedroom apartment. So that soured us on hosting once we had kids, for sure. And that's not even with the disasters of having like seeing the waterfall come from the ceiling. Like that's a tough one, because at that point it's just the whole night has changed. You've got some work ahead of you after that. 100%. Let's see. Before we move on to our next thing and start to wind things down, a quick stand-up update. I am headlining Go Bananas December 5th through 8th. So local Growl Pals, come out to that. And if you're listening to this weekend and you live on the West Coast, you can come all the way up to Tacoma. I'm at the Tacoma Comedy Club downtown. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But yeah, December 5th through 8th, local Growl Pals. I'll be at Go Bananas. Shoot me a message on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. We'll get you guys some free tickets just for fans of our show, not anybody else. Just for you guys, Growl Pals. And I also wanted to mention I do have a new set that came out on Nate Land. So go watch that. Nate Bargatze executive produced it and put it out on his social media, on his company's channel and all that kind of stuff. So that's I've got a lot more Nate Bargatze fans in my following now, which is very nice of him to do. So all you guys go watch that, leave a comment on it, and do all that good stuff. All right, are you ready to get into predictions for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you got? What are you feeling on this game? This is a big one. The Bengals need to have it to keep staying relevant. How do you feel it goes out?
I think it's close. I think it's tight. I think it's a slobber knocker, the way that these games often go with the Bengals and the Steelers. The Bengals we've seen it before. They were in this position against the Chargers. One of those, you got to have it. This one really feels like a got to have it. I do think that they play better on defense, and that Pittsburgh offense just doesn't scare you. And as great as the Pittsburgh defense is, any good defense, this Bengals team is still going to score on. They only had 17 against the Eagles. Kind of throw out the opener when they only scored 10 against the Patriots. They weren't really quite sure yet where Joe was with the wrist, but now that they're humming offensively, I 20 feels like a baseline. I'm going to go a little bit above it. I'm going to go 21-20. They don't even need McPherson except for 3 extra points, and the Bengals win this game by a single point. 21-20.
I like the idea of not needing McPherson. I don't like the 1 point game aspect of it. I would like to see the much bigger blowout in this one. But I've been wrong on, I feel like, at every point this season. I thought that the Chiefs were going to be a huge issue, and then they played them tough. I thought that we'd easily roll the Patriots and the Commanders. Both those went the other way. I kind of expected Baltimore to have their way because they had just had that big win, and then the Bengals should have won that game. So coming into this, I thought, with the way the season's going, something's just not clicking. And this is going to be the final end of that relevancy and those small diminished playoff hopes. So that was my initial gut instinct, was that Pittsburgh would come in here and win this game anywhere from 7 to 10 points. But because I've been so wrong, I'm just going to go hedge against myself and go completely opposite on this and say Bengals win in a blowout 28-14. I'm going 2-score win. Now, if you wanted to take that spread and alt it up, you're going to make some money if I'm right on that. Now, I just told you I haven't been right all season, but if I am right this time, you would make some money on that. I feel like the only time I have ever made money gambling on football was when I went to our live show at BetMGM Nation Kitchen and Bar for the Todd Frazier show, and there was somebody at the bar who was throwing out betting advice or at least opinions on that Browns game. And at the time, I was like, I don't know about putting money on the Cleveland Browns, but it worked out for me.
Yeah, so there you go.
What do you got for me? It doesn't have to be Bengals related. It could be NFL. What other advice do you have for me this week?
So I've got 3. And the one is the Bengals game. And I know I just said they're going to win 21-20, but that line, they opened as 2.5 point favorites. It's now up to 3. I went and I looked at all the games that the Steelers have played when they've been 3-point underdogs or more. They've not just covered 6 in a row. They've won outright 6 straight games when they've been underdogs of 3 or more. They've covered 10 of their last 14. It's kind of who Mike Tomlin teams are. They're going to be in it. It's going to be a gritty, close game. And this is less about the Bengals and more about the Steelers, that just anytime you can get the Steelers in points, I would run with it. Now, I still think the Bengals win this game, but I do think it's tight. 1 point win gets you the win if you're taking the 3 with the Steelers. The other game, and this is more kind of a principle thing, where I always think that you should bet against a team that plays on the road on Monday night the following week, because it's a short week. And for the Ravens, they were out in LA. So this is a short week coming from a West Coast trip, and they're playing one of the hottest teams in the Eagles, and they're giving the Eagles 3 points. Again, maybe the Ravens win the game. Maybe it's a close game, but I just think if you want to take the Eagles in 3 points, that's a really, really solid bet. Again, it feels like the Ravens have played a lot of close games. That game Monday night wasn't that close. Maybe it would have been had J.K. Dobbins not got hurt. But I love the Eagles in that spot, getting 3 points. It's not a primetime game. And then the other side of this is where that scares you a little bit is Lamar is something crazy like 25-1 against NFC teams because they just don't play him out that often.
Yeah.
They don't know how to defend him. But I think that Eagles defense will figure out a plan for the Ravens and find a way to get within 3. And then my third one, it's a little bit of a wild card, but I love what Brian Callahan has going on down in Tennessee. You know, they upset Houston on the road last week. Now they're on the road again. They're at Washington. They're getting 5.5 points. Washington was a 10-point favorite against the Cowboys last week and lost outright. Crazy game, but they lost it outright. I don't think Jaden Daniels is right. I think he's got his ribs are still bothering him. I love the idea of the Titans getting 5.5 points here. It kind of reminds me of when Brian Callahan came in with Zach Taylor, that Joe Burrow rookie year where it wasn't their first year because the first year was a disaster. But you see this a lot of times with young coaches where you can kind of see the light bulb go on. You can see things click, and mid-season they just start playing well. And I think that's where the Titans are right now. I don't know if they could win this game outright, but I love them getting 5.5 points.
All right. So I feel a little bit as a fan, morally opposed to maybe taking that Steelers pick, even though I respect what you're going for with that. But I love the Eagles pick. And now that I've heard you talk about the Titans, I'm on board with that one too.
Okay.
I feel like, I'm really feeling good about where we are. The fact that you are 1 for 1 in my book. So I don't know too many, experts out there that are batting 1,000. You are. So I'm taking both of these this week. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how many Growl pals are smart enough to join me on this. But Jay, we did it. We got to the end of Dey Light.
We did.
Thank you for stepping in for Paul on this one. I know it's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit, some of these things are a little bit more off the wall, but it was good. Yeah, it was good having you for it. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I listen, so it's fun to be on here and be a part of it. Maybe I'll jump in again. I got to ambush Paul on his birthday. Maybe I'll jump in for an ambush again one of these games down the line.
Yeah, it'll be fun just to bring you in, really keep Paul on his toes, 100%. You guys have the walkout on Sunday, then everything is back to normal with all the shows. Obviously, go listen to the Burrow show. That was a great one. That's out now, and you can get that as well. So keep listening to all of the shows. Leave a good review on whatever podcast app you listen to. That does help us a lot. And keep sending your questions to the growlerpodcast@gmail.com. And we will catch you next time.